if at the heart of it, you're still in a place of judgment, that's always what's going to be felt. And so NVC is truly about transforming that judgment consciousness in a healthy way, giving your space to express it fully.
Welcome to Reclaim Your Radiance, a sex, love, and relationship podcast where our focus is on your most important relationship, the one with yourself. Each episode, we are joined by an insightful guest who shares their story about how they've become their best, most radiant selves, despite diverse challenges. We dive into the depths of loving yourself, creating healthy relationships, and prioritizing pleasure, play, and joy, all while never shying away from the tough stuff. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Hello, and welcome back to Reclaim Your Radiance. This month, we are discussing a really powerful tool that has the ability to transform how we all communicate. Today, I am joined by Warren Hooley, a nonviolent communication workshop facilitator. He has been both a student and a teacher of this body of work for over 10 years. He has run countless workshops on this topic and is very passionate about ensuring that it is properly understood and used in a conscious way. Nonviolent communication is a body of work and communication framework that was invented and assembled by Marshall Rosenberg. There are numerous YouTube videos, books, audiobooks, online trainings, in-person trainings, and more available to all that wish to study this very valuable information. Now, while a lot of us may have heard about it, there are many misconceptions and misinterpretations of the work that often make their way into people's understandings and conversations about nonviolent communication, also known as and referred to in this podcast as NVC. What we are here today to do is to speak about those common misconceptions and pitfalls of NVC, as nothing is perfect, and reveal them in a way that allows us to all gain a greater understanding of the topic and hopefully encourage some of us to practice or even maybe study it some more. I'd also like to quickly mention that within this episode, Warren and I go through an example/live practice of NVC and what it can look like. And even if you're super familiar with the work and don't feel called to listen to the rest of this episode or aren't resonating with this topic so far, I highly encourage you to skip to that example and give it a listen. It is such a powerful demonstration of how these tools can be used for the greater good of all. I will admit that even when editing and re-experiencing myself go through this process with Warren, I was shocked at how much of an impact it left with me. Warren has so much to teach on this topic and truly demonstrates how he has an incredible grasp on how to embody a curious and empathetic energy when employing the consciousness of NVC. If you'd like to skip to the live demonstration, the timestamp of the example is provided in the episode description. And if you're now sitting there thinking, okay, great, but I still don't know what NVC really is, don't you worry, that is the very first question I asked Warren, and I just didn't want to paraphrase his answer to you here. I wanted you to get it straight from him. So without further ado, let's get to it. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah, you ready to have some really violent conversations?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's what we're here for, right?
Violent, non-violent,
yeah.
Semi-violent.
Yeah, right? Like, let's just make a whole spectrum.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we should probably start with a broad definition of what is nonviolent communication.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's kind of a tricky thing to define. I think I want to start with, and maybe a lot of what I share with you today is the misconceptions of what NVC is. I actually get a lot of feedback that people do not like the term nonviolent communication. I think there's an immediate interpretation that it suggests that people are being violent. And I try to playfully joke with that and bring some lightheartedness to it. There is another term called compassionate communication that people tend to connect with better. But just to give a little context, the word nonviolent communication, it stems from Marshall Rosenberg, who's the founder, his studies of kind of Hindu and Buddhist text. And there's a word that, I don't know the exact pronunciation, but ahimsa, which essentially is actually a common term that Gandhi used as well. And it's like, to do no harm is kind of like the intention behind it. Like Gandhi being really famous for having a really neutral, nonviolent approach to protesting, right? Like going on a fast and not eating. And, there's a specific intention behind that of to do no harm. And so that's kind of like maybe the essence or the energy that's meant to be inside the word nonviolent communication, which is kind of like, I guess, the closest translation that Marshall picked up on. So that's the word itself, somewhat of the connection to its history. Nonviolent communication, as its full intention, was meant to be a tool for connection at its heart. It's not meant to resolve your problems. It's not meant to be a conflict resolution tool. It's not meant to heal your trauma, even though it can do all of those things as a byproduct. Fundamentally, at its essence, it's just meant to connect. And specifically, it's meant to connect people on an emotional level and a needs-based level. Needs being another catch term that can be confusing. In the regular world, needs, I think, is a common association of like, oh, you're being needy, you're being too needy. Mm-hmm. But in this context, needs is like fundamental human needs. Things like belonging, security, safety, love. Yeah. These really primary needs that every human being, when they have them, can live, not only just survive, but can thrive in life. Mm-hmm. And so it's connecting to another human being and to ourselves on the level of what Marshall has called needs. But the synonyms to that are values or longings, are common words that are all interchangeably used. So yeah, that's kind of what it's all about. It all boils down to that.
Yeah, just that really huge, wonderful, complex system
so
of things. All right, so I guess to illustrate your place in all of this, how did you come to be a facilitator of this work, and what keeps you interested in coming back to it?
Yeah, so, okay, life story time.
Yay!
Snapshot. So I would say when I was a little boy, one of my defining qualities was how sensitive I was. And as I got older, and, especially I think even around middle school, I really started to get made fun of for being sensitive, for being dorky, for being skinny, for being shy. There's certain things that I got made fun of a lot for. And I really started to internalize this belief that being sensitive was a curse to me. And I felt like the only way to survive, I don't know if I consciously thought this, but the way that I tried to cope and survive my social circle of, guy culture was to learn to basically suppress my emotions and disconnect from them and maybe escape them as well. And so I really, without realizing, was dissociating from my body in a very mind-dominant way. So I wouldn't say it's like a severe form of dissociation, but it was definitely like putting all of my energy into my logical brain. And it worked, to a degree. I was able to navigate this friend group where we were really harsh on each other every single day. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes we were just teasing and a lot of camaraderie was built, but a lot of times we roasted and straight up bullied each other and like all ganged up on one person and just flamed them. Very, very common occurrence, almost daily. And so I was kind of always on edge, and you had to learn to defend yourself. And there's some things from that time in my life that I'm grateful for. Like I do think it's kind of an interesting concept. It's maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I actually think having the capacity and learning how to dissociate to a degree is actually important. If we were fully empathizing with everything all the time, it really would be overwhelming. I sometimes use the example of like if someone's, let's say, is cut badly and they're bleeding, if I let my emotions overwhelm me in that moment, like that's an emergency and they could lose their life. So I have to be able to learn to put that emotion aside for a second, to rise to the occasion and do what needs to be done, more logistic. So there's occasions where I think it's important.
Do you also think that, I've heard that your greatest traumas can sometimes turn into your greatest superpowers in that sort of way, that something that you had to go through and learn and overcome is the thing that you then put the most energy into and then become an even better expert than you would have been if that trauma hadn't occurred. And then you're able to kind of serve everyone else from that place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That does relate to NVC in a way for me, because the way that I've been emotionally supported through the body of work of nonviolent communication, amongst a couple other things as well, but primarily through NVC, the only way that I could become a teacher and help other people through that process is I had to have done it myself. And so it is true. I intimately understand what it's like to live in that, to be very dissociated and have to go through the process of reconnecting to my body, reconnecting to my emotions, learning emotional vocabulary. I've had to literally do that myself. So I have more of a depth of understanding. Whereas if someone grew up in a family or in a friend group where that was more normalized and expressing emotions was normal, it's going to be a little bit trickier for them to then guide someone through that process, most likely. So I do think it's an incredible gift. The ones that can make it through their healing journey can turn around and really offer that gift back to other people. So, by the time I graduated high school, I was this extremely critical, self-proclaimed cool kid, the cool guy, right? And there were some benefits to it. Like, I don't want to ever paint a picture like it was all bad. Like, there were some things that I felt like I was very stable in a certain type of way, but I predominantly utilized dissociation, disconnection, suppression to reach emotional stability. And I didn't realize at the time that there's actually another way that's actually more effective and has a whole bunch of healing benefits connected to it, and just had the capacity to improve my relationships, because I didn't realize it, but when I was 17, like, I really held everyone at an arm's length. It's like I fundamentally didn't trust anyone and I couldn't let them in. And so...
Well, your emotions are ruled by your brain instead of by your body. So it just, doesn't really allow for that flexibility or resilience. And
I'm surrounded by a bunch of people that if I ever shared any vulnerability with, they would attack me. So, it's a tough environment to really build any sense of trust, and even cultivate the ability to be vulnerable. And even if someone does judge me in my vulnerability, can I handle that? I never had the chance to really develop that. Anyways, I graduated high school, went through a phase of being really just escaping from the world. I think I actually fell more into escapism for about 5 years, just playing video games, smoking marijuana. Go Halo. There's some good months in there, but definitely, after a while, I really started to feeling like depressed, a lot of depression. And I think for me, depression comes from inaction, like being afraid to get outside my comfort zone. And I really, actually, I give myself some credit of, like, I really built a world of comfort. And where I didn't have to be around these guy friends, where I constantly felt on edge, I could finally relax in my nervous system. But the strategy that I chose had a bunch of side effects to it.
Well, depression, I think, often comes when we don't have a purpose, right? I think and we spoke about all those different needs that humans have. One of the greatest needs that all of us carry is purpose. I find it interesting too that within the book, the author listed like creativity and other things like that as like basic human needs. I mean, that speaks to a whole other conversation, but that you were lacking some of those needs.
Absolutely. I think like it was definitely purpose. It was growth, because I wasn't stepping outside my comfort zone. I wasn't growing. And like deep in somewhere inside of me, it knows I'm almost letting myself down. And that's really hard. That was really hard on me. And, those last couple of years of this addiction cycle that I was in, because essentially, I was in this cycle of, I'd start to feel emotions. I'd start to feel maybe depressed, or I'd start to feel I had a lot of self-judgment. And when I started to feel those emotions, I felt overwhelmed by them, because no one had taught me a single thing about processing emotion. And so what did I do? I reverted back to the only thing I knew, which was video games and read again. And I just could not break it. I couldn't get out. Even though like I'd go to bed almost every night being like, that's it, I'm quitting tomorrow. I'm going to quit tomorrow. And that lasted for like 2 years, where I said that every single night. And just goes to show like that. And it's funny, but the interesting thing was, the thing that actually broke me out of that cycle was the day that I admitted to myself that I needed help, which is still, I look back and I'm like, wow, it was such a foreign concept to me that it took me 5 years to even come to the idea, where I sat up in my bed one day and I was like, oh, do I need help? And then
sorry, it's not funny.
literally tears start to well up behind my eyes, and I feel them, and I'm like, what is that? I forgot even what feeling tears were.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, maybe that means something. You know, it was like a scientist looking at my own body was like, huh, interesting. These tears coming from the tear ducts of my face. You know, like I just had no connection to my own body.
Well, and like we're saying, that it's one of the reasons why you're able to teach it so well is because you've had this experience. Like I have never had that experience. Like that is a completely foreign experience to me. So I wouldn't be the ideal teacher of it. Like I've always been very connected to my emotions. I was the person who was constantly crying and I didn't quite understand why, you know? So with me, it's like, okay, learn to like express the emotions in a different way. But yeah, my emotions are just like on my sleeve and falling out of my face constantly. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. This is the interesting thing though. It would be interesting to see what your journey around emotional maturity was, and like where were your learning, you know, growth spots, and then how can you help people do the same? I've definitely dated some of my partners in the past, and they're kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, whereas I tend to I can really easily like dissociate and be in a state of more of avoidance. And so I can watch, like a really good example of this is I can watch any movie or any show very easily, even if there's a lot of intensity, gore, you know, violence in it. But because I like have this thing inside me that just immediately kicks in, where I'll just like slightly dissociate from it.
Wow.
Whereas I've had partners who like, they can't do that. They cannot control how much they're empathizing with the character. They're fully becoming the character. And if that were the case, it would literally be traumatizing.
Yeah, no, that's a little too much. Yeah, you need to be able to kind of, and I think I'm at a healthy place in between both of those. But I would say the thing that I had to learn was how to, and still learning obviously, is how to express those emotions, right? It's how do I communicate the heart, again, of nonviolent communication. How do I communicate how I'm feeling, and what does that mean I need? And like, yeah. And how do you make, in his language, like not a demand, but a request that they get to lovingly respond to in the way that the person is being authentic to who they are and their needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that is the unique component of it being a communication tool, is that it's not just the inner awareness, which is incredibly important. And you could argue is the foundation of NVC, is actually the awareness and the ability to name what's inside it, what's alive inside of yourself. But then there's the next step of being able to actually communicate it. What's interesting though, is that in a lot of our workshops, a lot of our trainings, people immediately want to learn expression. They want to jump to expression when they haven't learned I would call the consciousness yet. And it's actually much more important that if you really learn the consciousness and you live the consciousness, like being the energy of curiosity, for example, with self and with other, you don't really need to learn any of the languaging. Like the true essence of connection will occur. And this is what I really try to distinguish, the difference between the skill set and the languaging of NVC and the consciousness of it. And I've even been to a lot of intros. Like when I went to intros of people who first showed me NVC, it was very much the skill set right off the bat, and the structure of it. Which
just means you're in your logical thinking brain trying to think through the right language to say. Okay, yes. So do you have any good exercise, like in this moment, that we can provide to the listeners of like, how do you embody that consciousness?
Yeah. Okay, let me see if I can. I'm going to try to connect this back to my story as well, because I want to just make sure I finish. But I'm going to see if I can put them together.
Okay.
So I went through this kind of hermit phase. I came out of it. I really got into personal growth. I really started to see that like, wow, growing was so incredible. When I was about 26, I met this girl who was really into personal growth, and we became really great friends. And she was like, you know, Warren, I know you. I think you're going to love this workshop. And it was a workshop with this woman named Sarah Payton, Peyton. And she connects relational neurobiology with, and she's a certified NVC trainer as well. And it was funny because I realized I needed to be logically convinced through my mind that emotions had validity and that they actually were important on some degree. So I had to really be met where I was at. And she had the capacity to show me both. Now, I will say when I first met Sarah, I was like I totally thought it was like a show. She was pretending to be this kind. This was all just an act. But obviously, over the months of getting to know her, I was like, wow, no, this is actually, a human can be this kind?
Wow.
What?
That is some serious limiting beliefs there.
Yeah, and probably experience too of just like who had been around. And it was an incredible journey into realizing, that soft, kind voice had never developed it. That voice that can hold us with care, And so that is part of what the consciousness is. It's the internalized voice of care and reassurance and empathy to self. That is really what's going to transform your life. Mm-hmm. In terms of practices, I went to this workshop when I was 27 or 26, and my own integrity was like, wow, I can't turn away from this. I can't disregard what I just learned. And I'm like compelled to get to know my own nervous system, understand and build my feelings, vocabulary, learn to name my own needs better and communicate them. Like, I just felt I had to go on this journey. So I dove deep, and I tend to have a very passionate, borderline obsessive, perfectionistic personality type. So when I learned this, I was like, okay, I started listening to all the audio tapes of Marshall Rosenberg every single day. I went to a practice group here in Vancouver, British Columbia, twice a week for like a year or 2 years straight. And I really just dove in. And then there's this concept called empathy buddies, where it's such a great place to practice, where like both of you, there's this agreement, you're coming together to practice these skills together. And I did a lot of empathy buddies. And that was where I really cultivated my capacity. Now, keep in mind, I still was out in my life, and I would try to apply it in other contexts in my life, and it would still fall flat on my face. And it was a really hard process sometimes to be like, to not go to be like, oh, this doesn't work. To not jump to the conclusion that NVC doesn't work, but have the humility and the self-reflection to be like, okay, what did I do? Go back to audio series of Marshall, listen to it again, be like, oh, that's right. I wasn't really clearly stating my request. Mm. Or, I've really internalized this idea that my needs are a burden. Mm. That when I have a need, I'm a burden on people. And that I really need to transform that idea that my needs are actually gifts.
That was one of my favorite things he said, was like, you can be Santa Claus with your needs or whatever it was, that it's giving somebody the opportunity to fulfill your needs is really a gift to let somebody participate in like the overall well-being of all the humans on the planet. And like, that was kind of, I'm paraphrasing, but that's, yeah. But that kind of idea of, first you have to believe it yourself, that you're giving somebody something, that you're giving somebody the opportunity to meet your needs.
Yes. And that in and of itself is a long journey, particularly based on your upbringing and what you might have been given the message, even if it wasn't explicit, but like in some form, the message that you are a burden. Even as a baby, I'm crying and my mom gets frustrated with me and walks away. It's like, there's so many messages throughout our lives that can be like, whoa, you're being too needy. So that term can come up again. Yeah. So being able to come back to the place, I mean, this is where it's so much easier. If you think about how good does it feel when you enrich another person's life?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the premise of what Marshall builds all of NVC on, is this. He really believed that there's an inherent desire in a human being to enrich the lives of other people.
Well, it's even when somebody looks at doing something for themselves, they're way less likely to do it than if somebody's like, oh, but do it for this person you love. People do it immediately.
Yeah.
Like they'll drop everything and run to help somebody else in need, but they won't drop everything to run and help themselves.
Yeah. And so that process happens over time. And I would still say to this very day, when it's something that's really vulnerable for me, that you could say that there's a good chance that at least part of me is regressing back to being a little kid. And that kid doesn't have the wherewithal to believe that my needs are gifts. And it still thinks that I'm being a burden or I'm scared. And so over time, I think what NVC supports is it develops the part of you, the adult part of you that can be empathetic to self. And so simultaneously, my child self is coming up and my adult self is able to be curious and warm and caring, and that almost self-parenting dynamic strengthens over time. And there's a bunch of things that happen neurobiologically at the same time, like the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala and all the neurological pathways that strengthen over time.
Mm-hmm.
There's
so
a lot of
hold your inner child, really,
yes.
Right? And give empathy to them as well as yourself in this moment. Show your body that you exist in this present moment and that those old memories are just memories. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've definitely had a long journey with it. And I would still say I'm still, even at, 12 years of teaching NVC or maybe not teaching, but definitely being on the integration path, there's still times where I can really forget or a new mistake still comes up or an old one that I'm repeating. And I think this is true about any body of work, that learning to embody a healthy sense of humility and self-reflection is absolutely crucial. And this is the tricky thing. And this is another thing that I think Marshall was really trying to bring to the world. He was really trying to distinguish the difference between empathy consciousness and judgment consciousness. He's kind of famous for like having these puppets and these monikers of like the giraffe and the jackal that he would use as animals to represent empathy consciousness and judgment consciousness. Mm-hmm. I don't use those as much, but I think
you don't use puppets.
I think bringing puppets in is great. I mean, I'm an advocate for bringing any type of creativity in all honesty.
Absolutely.
But I think it's important I think at the fundamental nature of what Marshall was trying to get across is like he got his PhD as a clinical psychologist. So he went through the system. He tried to learn how to support people through that frame, that format. And he tells these stories of how essentially it just taught him how to judge people more intellectually. And he went from like, rolling down his window while driving his car and yelling at someone, being like, "You jerk," because someone cut him off, to then, after 12 years and having a PhD, rolling down his window and saying, "You sociopath." So he just more intelligently was still judging, but he's still fundamentally in the same consciousness. And what he really wanted to share was like, there's such a big difference between judging someone and what you think about someone and what is going on inside of your own body. Being able to look inside and be like, what feelings are alive for me? And what does that say about what's important to me, what my values are, what my needs are in this moment?
Well, so much of a judgment is your own reflection, right? Like if you're looking with a lens of judgment in somebody else, it's often because we're judging something within ourselves that we don't accept, right? I mean, that's at least something I've come to really accept is true of, even if somebody drives dangerously, it could be, well, I don't know. For me, I guess that's a bad example, because for me, when I see somebody driving dangerously, like my empathetic brain goes to, oh, I wonder if they had a bad day, or like, oh, I wonder if they're late for something, or like, I've been there. Mm-hmm. Like, as much as, okay, also be safe and don't hurt people around you, I feel like my brain naturally goes there, which is, it's really beautiful to feel that instead of just getting angry. But yeah, I feel like the judgments are always a reflection of what's inside of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that's a good segue to, I think one of the greatest teachers of my life has been working with teenage boys. Is because, especially at the beginning onset of that journey, that very thing would happen to me. I would see reflections of my younger self. I would see these cool boys and the way that they're treating each other. And I would get really triggered. And I would go to this place of like, you're, kind of challenging them and talking about how that connects to the violence that happens in the world. And as you can imagine, their responses were to get defensive. And I would end up getting to these 45-minute debates with this 15-year-old kid about politics. And it would just be like, at the end of the day, I'd leave that scenario and I would really be like, that didn't feel good. Something doesn't feel right. Like, it doesn't feel, when I really went inside, I was like, am I actually accomplishing what I truly want to accomplish? So getting clear on what that is, what those ultimate goals are, and then holding myself accountable to every conversation, every interaction. Am I actually moving towards the accomplishment of that? And so what I found is that when I went back, I had these judgments of my old self. I judged the teenage version of me instead of really going through the process of empathizing with that kid. Like, don't get me wrong, I still think holding people accountable is absolutely crucial. And you can do both. Both can coexist. You hold someone accountable, especially to like their behavior and their strategy, but you're willing to see below their actions into what need are they trying to meet.
Exactly.
And that's a lens that I think it's not the only lens to apply, but it's definitely one lens that's very, very, very important. So like as a youth worker, I've really learned to see past someone's behaviors, or maybe like, at least initially, see past the behavior, see what strengths they're displaying, see what needs might be alive for them, and then try to connect with them on that level. And they can see like, I want you to win. That's the energy that I bring with teenage boys now. And I set that right off the tone, right off the bat. Like, I'm here to try to help you. I want you to thrive. I genuinely do. I don't want you to be punished because you're a bad person. And that's the consciousness of the judgment consciousness that I grew up with. And that's so normal in the Western world and maybe everywhere, I'm not sure. And so transforming that ability to like really wanting someone to win and really showing them like, I want to be on your side. And, I'm going to hold you accountable. Like, I'm not just going to let you get away with that. Like maybe a good example of this is like, boys will come up with nicknames for each other a lot. And so I've had ones where like, they'll be like, little Johnny. Oh, okay, they're little Johnny. And everyone starts to laugh. And I'm like, hold on a second. Let's pause that for a sec. Like, I'm curious, like, and I'll go to the person who's Johnny. Be like, what comes up for you when you hear that name? Do you like that name? And they'll always be like, well, whatever, I don't care. I'd be like, no, do you like it? Do you appreciate it? Do you actually enjoy having that nickname? And you're like, no. I'm like, okay, interesting. And then I go to the person who said it. I'm like, so like, what comes up for you when you hear them say that he doesn't like it? And sometimes the boy will like fake apologize. I can see that it's insincere, but I'd be like, really just take a moment to like go into the world of like, if this is the effect that this has on him, like, yes, maybe you're meeting a need for entertainment and humor and fun by making this nickname of this boy, but at what cost? What kind of culture are you creating within your peer group? And just like getting them to stop and actually look at the impact of their own actions. And it does take some tactfulness. I've definitely failed many times attempting to do this in the past, but it's pretty incredible when it works. And I just get them to see their own value and whether they're actually living in integrity with their own values, which is usually not the case.
I mean, that's pretty incredible to be able to do, especially with teenage boys. I kind of want to return to, you mentioned punishments. What I loved in Marshall Rosenberg's work was talking also about praise, that praise is just as almost detrimental as punishment. And that like when there's any sort of response in that way, that like you either win something or lose something. Because I almost, when you're like, I want all the boys to win, like, yes, you want them to win, but I think it's more like you want them to get their needs met, because like winning or losing is still almost like a judgment of their behavior. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this necessarily, but just that like even judging somebody positively is still a judgment, right? It's still your opinion and you're not separating observation from reaction.
Yes, that's definitely, I think it's a lot easier to notice what we would call negative judgments. Positive judgments are a little bit harder to notice because, and like I will say, like, I love Marshall. I think he's brought unbelievably important things to the world, and he's made it really simplified, and he's really inspired so many incredible people. Like, I really believe that. And I think it's natural and it's okay to not fully agree on every single part. I do hear what he's saying though. Like, I think inside that notion is that reward. I don't know. The praise for me is, I think there's a lot of complexity inside that. Again, we started getting to a lot of semantics here. Semantics over what does win mean? Are we connecting it to winning and losing in competition? What does praise mean? But yes, definitely sometimes I think reward can also be, it can train a child in a certain way, like someone's developmental phase of like, if you do this, then this reward happens. Instead of maybe the fundamental reward being
my needs were met.
Or even just the gift of enriching another person's life, that is enough. That just inherently a human being, when they get to feel that feeling, that can drive them to do unbelievable things in their life. You know, I think like one of the, I've seen this like interesting TED talk on how Wikipedia was built, and like no one got paid to build Wikipedia. It was completely a driving force of just people wanting to contribute to the world and create something. Extremely powerful motivator. Yeah.
The best motivator there is. And that's where the most pure things come out too.
When it comes to praise, I do think, you know, I can see how, if we need to be careful. I think if you just tell someone there's something, right? You're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're smart. On one hand, I could see that being a healthy development of someone's ego, which, irregardless of whether we like to believe it or not, like our self-identity, our ego is always going to be there. So you might as well have a healthier one.
Definitely.
But I do think that there's a tactfulness and there's a complexity to how to do that in a balanced way.
Well, yeah, we all have some sort of wounding from when we're like childhood, even if it's something quote unquote positive, right? Like that, you know, mine was intelligence, that I was told so many times that based on the fact that I was good at school, I was intelligent, which meant that I had to then like keep up with this image of being intelligent, because then I lost something, right? That, you know, I was worth less to others, not worth less, but just worth minus, right? Like worth less things, that if I wasn't smart, like that's what drove me into my career, really. Like it was a huge driving force, and you have to like then let go of this piece of your identity that somebody has drilled in as just like this inherent piece of you.
Yeah. I think it can, if the praise or the naming of someone's strength isn't rooted in an observable thing, then it can create a distorted perception of who you are. And then it might come smack you back in the face later in life when other people are like, I'm not seeing that observably. I'm not seeing you do that. But, you know, people are seeing that you were good at school. You're getting grades. That was the observable. And the deduction and the positive judgment is that you're smart, which is a very general statement, right? They could say you're book smart. Your kind of like IQ type of intelligence is great. They maybe be a little bit more specific, right?
Yeah, but it's still like, it is that repeated praise that it still assigns some sort of identity to you that you then might be afraid of letting go of, or afraid of stepping outside of, or afraid that you might lose. I think we're getting so far down a little bit of a rabbit hole here.
It's true. But I think this is where maybe you can, how you relate this to NVC is NVC really tries to differentiate observations from interpretation, which isn't the thing I talk about the most, but I do think it's extremely important.
I think it's really important when it comes to not escalating the situation into, like unhelpful emotions, I would call it, right? And like really just looking at, okay, did I say something that's really true? Like, that's why I love when it goes into like, I feel this, and it goes into like those language semantics of like, I'm only going to speak to what is absolutely true for me, that like, you can't even contest this because it's all within me, right? It's not you make me do this. It's I feel this, like using those I statements, allowing it to be like, there's no contest. This is true because I spoke only to what's in my reality. Right? Or only to what I can observe. Like, I saw you wake up at 12, not you're lazy. Yeah. Or,
the classic interpretations that tend to generate reactions, more reactivity is, you're always using any term that's like you're always, you never.
Hyperbolizing.
Right. That's common. So one of the greatest things, I think, bringing an awareness to your interpretation is just being able to name, like, like the story I'm telling myself is, right? That's a really powerful statement.
I love that statement so much.
Like, or just like my interpretation of when you said that, like, this is how it's landing for me. This is how I'm thinking about it in my head, or this is the emotions that come up for me. Mm-hmm. And then that gives the opportunity for someone to clarify it. But if I come to this place of like, no, this is what happened, this is the truth, and then I start building everything on top of that, that's where I think it can be really tricky to move through it and process it together with somebody else. Mm-hmm. If you fundamentally disagree on the interpretation of what happened.
Yes, that can be huge.
It is a building block. I don't put as much time and energy into it, but I do think getting to some degree of ability to navigate that is really important. Mm-hmm. And then once that's established, I find more of the transformation from the actual connection on an empathy-based level, like feelings and needs.
Mm-hmm. And being curious. I think the most powerful reaction to somebody saying like, oh, so this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm interpreting from what you've said, is like, oh, and just like meeting it with curiosity, especially when it's wrong, of going, oh, wow, that's really not what I said at all. That's not what I meant to communicate. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like that realization that if you're not understood, you weren't communicating.
Yeah. I would say like there's something about in that for me is about taking accountability. I think one of the greatest diffusers of conflict, one of them is to be able to take accountability, even if it's like 0.1%. Mm-hmm. Even if the other person is like, was way more accountability in the dynamic, even just having the wherewithal and the humility to acknowledge your piece. Now, granted, that might not mean that they're going to take accountability, but it I think does increase the chance. And for me, what it's done is like, if I've been vulnerable and I've gone into my humility and I've taken accountability, and then maybe even made a request for the other person to do the same, and they're not willing to, that's actually a really good sign for me to like, okay, this isn't a relationship that I want to keep navigating. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to respectfully bow out, because that to me, it's such an important building block of a healthy relationship. That's kind of a byproduct. I don't know if that's necessarily directly an NVC concept, but it's something that's really, really evolved in my own practice.
I think taking responsibility for your actions is pretty fundamental to it. Something that really struck me, like I had to stop listening, like I had to pause the audiobook and go, wait, and like go back and listen to it again, was taking the word responsibility and saying, okay, you are response able. You are able to respond, and just breaking it down like that and saying like, oh, you can't take responsibility for something that isn't yours. Like for somebody else's emotions, you can't take responsibility for that. You can't like go and take that from them. I don't know, something about that struck me really hard. And I do think it's an essential part of being empathetic, is taking responsibility for your own actions and your own reactions. And so you can see others taking responsibility for theirs. Mm-hmm.
Well, Marshall has the closest thing that I've seen him talk about with this is he calls it emotional liberation. Mm. And so it's been one of the primary things that I think I've expanded on, like, because I've learned a lot of relational neurobiology, I kind of add maybe a trauma-informed lens on top of what his teachings are. But emotional liberation is this idea, the 3 stages of emotional liberation is, the first stage is like, everything is my fault. Like you take all the responsibility. Someone starts feeling bad, you're like, oh my God, like you immediately personalize it as like, this is my fault. I did something wrong. Lots of guilt. And usually that's the driving force of then like your actions and how you behave. It's like you feel bad, so you do everything you can to make it better, or you'll stop doing things, and you walk around tiptoeing and people pleasing. And so that's, I don't know why he calls it the first stage. I think it's just one of the stages. Some people can stay in that and get locked in that. I think some people can actually go to the second phase. They can just not even do the first phase. what he affectionately calls the obnoxious stage, which is like, nothing is about me. Like, that is 100% your stuff. Like, what's that? Like, oh, that's you, has nothing to do with me. It's like very you centered. Like, don't even talk to me about that. Like, you take responsibility for your stuff. And I actually think it's an important phase to go through. You do need to, especially if you tend to really take responsibility for other people's emotions specifically, that's a really important one. And this is the tricky thing, is we live in a world where that's still happening a ton, where people were like, you made me feel this way. And that is such a tricky thing to navigate.
Just take those words out of your vocabulary. Just take them out. Oh my goodness. Yeah. The amount of times to just notice, or just, okay, maybe not take them out, but just like notice every time you say, you make me feel this way. This made me do this. Nobody is making you do anything.
Yeah. But it's not to say that when this thing happened, you felt this way. That's fine. But that distinction is incredibly important.
Yes. And will not anger the person who you are then accusing of making you feel that way.
Yeah. And if you're trying to control the other person's behavior because of what emotion came up inside of you, now don't get me wrong, there's a complexity inside that concept, but I think a really common term I hear these days is like, you're shaming me. And now on one hand, I do think someone could actually intentionally try to evoke shame in you. That's possible, right? Someone could like judge you in a specific way and like try to evoke shame. That's the real thing. And I could accept that you call that shaming. But if someone just shares something and you feel shame, that doesn't mean they're shaming you.
Yes.
It means you're feeling shame. And there could be many, many reasons why that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, to me, this is actually the primary driving force of things like cancel culture, which is like, I'm feeling a really uncomfortable emotion, and I feel I feel really scared. I feel scared, and I feel care for other people that are going to feel that emotion too, and I don't want them to feel that way. But again, that's like, you're taking responsibility and you're trying to protect someone else from not having to feel bad, which you just can't do. You can't. You can try to control people and their actions and their behavior and their beliefs, but
yeah,
it's a losing battle.
You don't have the ability to control the response of somebody else. And you have to let them have those emotions, because like those emotions are teachers and will, right? Like, anger is so useful. Like, I got so angry the other day. I was screaming, and I don't get angry very often. And it's a gift. And it's kind of like, there's a part of me, like when I cry really hard or get really, really angry or something, that kind of can step back and go, oh my gosh, what is this teaching me? What is this telling me right now? Oh, one of my needs isn't being met in a really strong way. This crossed my boundaries. This crossed the agreements. Well, I liked, boundaries can sometimes be like a limiting way of talking about relationships. I like to kind of say agreements sometimes. But yeah, just like somebody broke this agreement that I thought we had, and this really hurts. And, being able to sit with that, process that, like, even, I don't know, I personally journal about it to be able to like understand it, wait a couple of days and then bring it up.
And I think you're illustrating a perfect example of, your emotions are a gift when you've actually learned the skills and the tools to how to process them and see the beauty inside of it, see the learning that's in it. But a lot of the world hasn't learned that yet. And the school system is not teaching them that to them. Unfortunately, the parents never learned it. They're not in any kind of community that's showing them that. That was very true for me, right? All the way till I was 26, I didn't learn a single skill. Not one. In fact, I was made fun of for it. So it was like, I was the opposite. I would like more resistance to going to emotion. So just the I do agree with you. Like, it's actually so fundamentally important that you got to recognize that evolutionarily, your body has this unbelievably complex nervous system that can feel like hundreds of emotions, hundreds of body sensations for a reason. It's evolved that way for a reason. And it's your body and your heart, your emotions can be such an incredible compass, but you have to learn its language. You have to learn how to actually name it and turn it into connecting to your needs or your values. And then that can lead to taking action. And that's how you transform your life, living from like the core of who you are, not living from your head and what you think you should do, which is how I lived most of my life. Well, yeah, it's still most of my life.
Okay, so how do we help people get there?
I mean, we're starting with theory. That's what we're doing right now. Just explaining it, telling good stories. I think is a great way to do it. But I think for me, it was like, there was a fundamental recognition that when I judged people, it never gave me what I really wanted. So I had to be connected to what those deep needs were. First of all, like what would truly bring me happy? What would truly help me feel fulfilled? And then really, really having the humility and to be like, is the way that I'm currently living my life bringing me that?
Do you have a suggestion of some sort of exercise that somebody can do if they encounter this themselves?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the tricky thing. Like, what I recommend is that you need to build the muscles that are going to help you develop the consciousness of empathy. Actually, I feel like I should have said this earlier, but I just want to define empathy because we throw a lot of words around in the world of NVC and nonviolent communication, and sometimes people have different definitions of it. So empathy to me, if you look at the dictionary definition, it's like the ability to imagine what someone else is feeling. A lot of it's an internal imagination process. What NVC is teaching is what I call active empathy. And active empathy is connecting communication to it. And it's the act of actually, let's say I'm thinking inside, oh gosh, I can only imagine how frustrated that person must feel. That would be empathy inside. External empathy would be like, do you feel frustrated? Question mark.
Kind of like active listening.
Yeah. But it's through that curiosity and through that question, through the guess, is where the connection occurs and also supports the person connect to themselves. It's usually when we're in like a triggered state, it's really hard. The part of our brain that is the prefrontal cortex that helps us empathize with ourselves is usually not as active or completely not active. So when someone else comes in with their prefrontal cortex and is able to support you in that process, it can really help calm your nervous system down and help you name those feelings and needs. So this is why I'm a little bit careful. Like I'm trying to think of a practice that is going to help build the consciousness, because I don't recommend that people go to the skill set, that they don't go to trying to communicate yet. There's quite a bit of due diligence and practice you got to put in. One of the greatest pitfalls of NVC is not practicing enough and trying to like immediately implement the tools and the skills you've learned. And don't get me wrong, if you have enough skill transfer, so if you've done enough other things that are similar, it's possible that you could implement it very, very quickly. But I would say for the majority of people, that's not true. And there's some unlearning you're going to need to do. So I think like one of the things we do like in an intro training is we also look at what are the most common non-empathy responses. How do we normally respond to people? Not to say these are good or bad, but these aren't empathy.
Oh, the worst one. The worst one is somebody tells you something and they really just want to be heard and understood. And they're telling you about this time when somebody, broke their vase and it really hurt their feelings. And then the person who's listening is immediately on a story about how that happened to them. And they just switch it and it's all about them. And they're talking about this is the exact same thing. That's not what that person needed in that moment. Can you tell this has happened to me a lot? Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my goodness, it is. And it took me so long to learn that. But once I finally saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And like, I have to catch myself sometimes from like switching it, but it's like, no, this is about them. They shared something. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want a reflection back at them that's still about them. Like hold up a mirror, show them what they just said, let them know that you've heard them and empathize with them, but don't start talking about yourself. Oh my God.
I love your passion. I can feel maybe the feelings and needs that are alive there.
It happened to me so many times.
I hear you. There's actually a lot of layers to this one specific, because I think this is one of the more complex ones, because there's some cultural dynamics at play. Some people culturally, they learn that this is the way that you support somebody. And I think when I say like share your own story, like sometimes it can meet the need for a shared reality, a sense of mutuality between, oh, this person's been through the same thing as me. And that's great. It's actually a great thing to share, but it's about the timing.
Yes.
Another layer to this is that people who haven't been heard enough themselves will usually try, without realizing it, pull the focus back on them. Mm-hmm. Like your capacity to listen to someone is directly related to how much you've been listened, which is kind of ironic, but it shows that a lot of people are in a deficit. Most of the world is in an empathy-based deficit. They haven't been heard. There hasn't been space for them to talk. And like this patience of like, okay, like I'm just here for you. My focus is just going to be completely with you. You know, this is part of the element of the consciousness of NVC. Mm-hmm. The consciousness is about your presence, about where your focus is. You know, where's your intention? These kinds of things are at the heart of it. And so when I'm entering an empathy dynamic with someone, especially if it's consensual and it's been agreed upon, I'm really focusing on, okay, like, yeah, you start talking about your broken vase, the story might pop up in my head, but I've learned like the windshield wipers, like, whoosh, 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 and okay, we'll just put that aside right now. I might even sometimes, there's been rare moments where I'm like, ooh, I can just tell how much I want to be heard. Mm-hmm. I have all this built up stuff inside my system and I want to be heard. And like, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you can have these conversations where like, you're both just talking about your own thing at the same time. Yeah. And sometimes it can actually be pretty good.
Sometimes it's fine. Like, sometimes that's what's expected.
But other times you really want to be heard and really land and have someone meet you with curiosity and help you name things. And oh, it's such a gift.
And it's taken a lot of time for me to even develop the ability to, and like you have to have a certain relationship with someone, but that's part of NVC, I think, right? It's being able to develop the relationships where this is possible, that you can say, no, sorry, I was really sharing and I really needed you to hear me. And I don't get that you understood that I just want to be heard right now. Mm-hmm. And you've now switched to sharing about yourself. I would really love if we could continue talking about me.
Yeah.
And that is so difficult to say.
It is. And, you know, I'd probably add to that, but like, do you feel open to that? Is that something you feel like you have capacity for? Mm-hmm. That like they may not be, they may actually be, they just can't hold space right now. And so that's where the consent part. So that's another major pitfall of NVC, in my opinion, is learning how to bring in consent, how to have this check-in space of like, hey, do you feel open to just like really listening for the next 20 minutes or so? I just really want to be able to process this. And if you could just help reflect back what I'm saying, help make feelings and needs guesses, like I'd really appreciate that. Do you feel genuinely open to that?
Yeah.
That's me practicing consent, and consent's alive too, right? That can change mid conversation. So that's a complex skill to learn, and it can feel really awkward.
I feel like so many people attach consent only to like sexual situations.
Yeah. Or touch. Yeah.
Or touch. But like, yeah, there's like a consensual use of my time, of my listening, of my ability to hold space, right? Like holding space for someone who didn't ask you to hold, like who didn't first let you consent to holding space for them. Oh my God, that feels painful, right? Like somebody almost like stealing your empathy and steal it. Like, I don't know. I've experienced it only a few times, but it really can hurt, especially if then you're not given the same thing in return, right? Like there's no reciprocation, which again is kind of what you spoke to earlier, that if that is missing in a relationship, it's not like, well, maybe this isn't the right relationship for me.
Yeah. But just bringing that awareness of like, both people really need to be okay with this if we're going to go into it.
Yes.
It is really helpful. Like on both sides, the person who maybe really wants to process something, but also the person who's being supportive. Like both of them need to be okay with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not to say like, I think the consent can get complex. Like it doesn't say that you necessarily always need to be really specific in your consent. There can be an implied consent in your relationship over time. Like you start to learn each other's rhythms and patterns, and maybe you can intuitively start to feel. Because to me, that's a big part of consent, is what I call attunement. You're really tuning into someone. You're actually paying attention to them, and you start to notice them a little bit distracted. You start to notice, okay, maybe they're not in the right space, like being able to check in with each other based off the cues that we see. So consent is another really major pitfall that I like to name. I like to be really, really transparent and upfront right in the intro training. Like, look, here's the common ways you're going to probably fail. It's probably not it's probably not like, if this happens, it's like, these are probably going to very likely happen to you. Be aware of them, and you can navigate and learn through them. Like, just like I have, like the consent one for me I've experienced it more as I started giving someone empathy, and I'm bringing them into this layer of vulnerability, and we haven't built enough trust yet. And I've had people get triggered, like they're reactive, and at times where it really shocked me. I was really taken off guard. And what's tricky is that I'm in a really soft place too. I'm really trying to be caring. And when someone gets angry at me in that place, it can also really be really hurtful to me.
Yeah.
So I've had to be really careful with that and learn that lesson in a hard way a couple times.
So then that's a good segue into, let's say you learning all these tools and you want to bring them into a relationship, and you start, practicing, and maybe you didn't open that up, or you tried to open up that consent and the other person didn't quite have that same language to meet you there yet. And so you start kind of empathetically listening, and then it triggers the other person, and now you're triggered as well. And now there's just this giant vortex of misunderstanding. What do you do from there?
Well, here's the fascinating thing. I think if you're truly embodying the energy of curiosity at the minimum, but if you can also embody like care, have the intention to understand them, if you're just embodying that energy, I don't think you could ever trigger anybody. Like, I'd be really hard pressed to find like that would trigger someone. Like, it had to be a really strange trauma that they have that creates an association to that. So that's the consciousness of NVC.
Yeah.
I think people get more triggered by the languaging, because all of a sudden someone starts to talk differently than they normally talk. And it feels like, unfortunately, people's association to that is, oh, you're using this tool to try to get like win. You're trying to use it to manipulate me. You're going to use this against me in the future. If I open up vulnerability, you're going to use it against me. And those things could be true. So a lot of this is why I'm such a strong advocate of build the consciousness. If you're going to practice it with your partner, say things like, hey, I'm learning this new skill set, and this is what it looks like. It's their feelings and needs guesses. This is what I'll try. Are you open to like helping me practice this with you? At any point you don't want to do that anymore, that's okay. And just really being, but even then I'm weary, because it's really likely that like you're going into like a 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10 difficulty range. Why would you do that in any other area of your life? Like it's smarter to go into like 2 out of 10, do it with an empathy buddy, go to practice groups, get good at it. It reminds me of like trying to play like a professional basketball game and you haven't built any of the skills yet. You haven't learned how to shoot a free throw or dribble the basketball yet.
What about the idea of kind of titrating yourself through the skills? So like, let's say, because personally, like I want to learn this, I want to employ this in my life, but I'm learning a lot of other things. My focus is in a lot of other areas, and I'm not going to go get an empathy buddy. I'm just not. I know myself. And I do want to practice with the people who I already have a relationship with, right? So what would you say to the approach of maybe taking like one of the pieces of language and try to see how much you can incorporate that in, or like one of the pieces of consciousness and try to just incorporate that in slowly, like one piece at a time, practice it until it's like, okay, this is part of my new vocabulary, or okay, this is part of my new mindset, like shift, that each time I like start to judge someone, I'm going to really think about, is this a judgment or am I just observing? And kind of like just taking on one piece at a time. Do you think that would work?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. I would say the two things that come to my mind right now are definitely like self-journaling, self-empathy practice is a really great way to just, you could literally just create 2 categories. One is feelings, one is needs. Have your feelings and needs sheets right there beside you and just go through your day. It could literally just be a daily practice for 5 minutes and just get used to like going through and naming the different feelings you had at different moments, especially if they're like, sticky moments or like, moments where it felt challenging. But it could be anything. It could be celebrations too. Bringing more awareness, strengthening your vocabulary of being able to notice that inside yourself. That's an incredible foundational practice that can happen. There are like workbooks and sheets you can actually get that help you kind of more move through it in a structured way. The other part that I would say that if you want to do it within your existing relationships, I would recommend starting with processing things that don't have anything to do with each other. So like practice supporting someone as they're talking about this conflict they have at work with someone that there's no relationship to the two of you. That's a great way to start building. But even then, I would say that's still a little bit higher. Even lower than that, I'd be like, let's just do a daily practice when we're both not triggered at all to talk about our pet peeves and practice supporting each other and just build the rhythm and build the feeling of being there for each other and like flexing the muscles of presence. And pet peeves are a great way.
Yeah, I like that. Especially because the other person has probably experienced your pet peeves and maybe even seen you in a triggered state, but starting from a non-triggered state would be, really helpful.
And like a simple structure on that might be like, let's try to name 3 emotions and 3 needs connected to this one pet peeve. I will say, once you get quite good at NVC, I could, in a very high percentage chance, it'll start to connect to something way deeper. So yeah, it'll start off as, someone being really loud motorcycle. When someone's driving a motorcycle and it's really loud, that might be the beginning point, but that might start to relate to things at a much deeper level and be like, oh wow, this is actually connected to something.
Can you give an example of how, like, let's go from the motorcycle, like how would you dive deeper and deeper?
I mean, we could, if you're willing to share, do you have an example? Are you willing to share a pet peeve that you have?
Okay. One of the ways of which I know that somebody cares for me is to spend time with me. And if there's no reciprocation on that planning, if there's, one of the big pet peeves in this is like you offer up dates, like you say, here are, I can do Wednesday and Thursday and Sunday. And the other person goes, oh no, none of those work for me.
Right.
And there's no reciprocation of dates. And to me, that tells me, oh, this person doesn't actually want to spend time with me, which means they don't actually care about me. Like that is immediately what happens in my head. And so that's a pretty big one.
Okay. So we can go into that. I will say I wouldn't classify this as like a minor. I wouldn't classify this as a minor pet peeve.
It's not a minor. Okay. Should we start smaller?
No, let's do this one. This one's great. But let me just give a couple examples of ones I would recommend if you wanted to work with a partner on it.
Okay. Yeah.
I would do like someone chewing with their mouth open.
Oh God. Yeah.
Right. Like I think that usually falls into annoyance. The common emotion with pet peeve is annoyance. So like someone walking slow in front of you and you can't get around them. These like, oh, there's a tag in your shirt that's scratching you. Like these are the really, I'm going.
Okay, they're very small.
I've had a lot of time to think about this and like think of examples.
Yeah.
This one is so directly related to primary emotions in relationships. I guarantee this one's going to be deeper, but that's great.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I want to give one that's real. And that's a little deeper, but let's try diving into a smaller one then, like a real pet peeve.
No, I think this one's great.
Okay.
If you're open to it.
Yep.
Okay. So if we were meeting for the first time or like we didn't have it, even if we didn't, even where we're at in our relationship, I would say something like, so Kris, are you open to me? Like I heard what you just shared, this thing that you have, this pet peeve of planning and time together. Are you open to me making, there's probably 3 things that I'm going to do with you. If you're open to it, it's like reflect back, kind of summarize a little bit what I'm hearing you say. Make guesses on what you're feeling. So I might say things like, do you feel irritated when that happens? That's an example. Or like a needs guess, which is more like, are you longing for connection? Right. As another example. Are you open to like me doing those 3 things for the next little while?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an example of me checking in with consent. Okay, so just to summarize what I heard you say, it sounded like, especially when you, like I'm imagining this metaphor. Sometimes I use metaphors. Maybe this is not what I said consensually, but I'm almost imagining like a tennis court, like the ball's in your court type deal. Like you hit the ball over to the other person and you're like, hey, does these 3 dates work for you? And then the other person's just like, nope. And the ball just falls to the ground. And there's no action, there's no initiation of passing it back to you to see and continue this process, back and forth process of finding the time. And so when that occurs, like the immediate thought that comes up in your mind is like, this person doesn't care about me or this relationship, maybe.
Yeah.
Does that feel true?
Yeah.
Okay. So I imagine there's probably a myriad of emotions there, like frustration, maybe annoyance.
Do you want me to name them?
Do you feel frustration or annoyance?
Yes. Yes, both of them.
Yeah, feel free to naturally respond however you want to respond.
Yeah. Frustrated, annoyed, unloved, honestly. Like it's a deep feeling of not being valued and not being loved by that person.
So is it kind of like a little knock, like a little like a hurt, like little, would hurt be a word that you would?
Yeah, there's hurt.
Does that ever generate any like a sense of bitterness or resentment?
Yes, and a lot of confusion because it doesn't make sense to me. Like because they would often, their words wouldn't match their actions, is what confuses me. Right? That if they'd say, "Oh yes, I want to spend time with you. Oh yes, I value our connection," but then won't put the time into seeing me, or like, because to me, part of the planning process is part of spending time with someone, right? It's a necessary part. It's how you literally do it. And so if that component isn't present, then your words are false. Then what do your words mean if you're not actually willing to do the action? Yeah.
I would imagine maybe, is there like layers of doubt that start to form around, can trust really be built in this dynamic? Can I really trust this person's word? They're like their integrity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that almost seems like the trust and integrity pieces are there, then that can really tell you like this person cares about you and that they love you, that they want to spend time with you.
Yeah, which again, why like it hurts so much because it's so contradictory. Especially if that trust was already built.
So like, okay. Is there like, it sounds like there's like this longing not only for the integrity and like being able to trust, but also more understanding or more communication about if something's like maybe coming up for them, like what's getting in the way, what's happening for them, what's on their side. Like you're kind of being left in the dark, it sounds like.
Yeah, a little bit. Just like that non-response as well, right? It's like the same, and like getting ghosted after one date is one thing. Like, okay, sure, you shake it off because this person doesn't actually really know me or love me. But if there is an established relationship where you do believe that there's love and care and trust and compassion, and they just kind of act in a way that just negates all that, at least to me. And I know that this is the story I tell myself. I know that this is all based on my value system and how I receive love and how I perceive love given to me from others. But yeah, it just, something's missing there. That there's a disconnect.
I just like really can feel this like essence of like effort, the willingness to put effort so that time can be spent together. Like that's like the core building block. Yeah.
That comes from, one of the top ways I experience love is spending time with someone.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that with me. It's such a great way to like just like even get to know you a little bit better and get a sense of, experiences you've had, but also how that reflects of what your values are and what helps you feel cared for. And
thank you for listening.
Totally. So that's an interesting thing about this process is like, I'm getting to understand you on that feelings and needs level. And it's like, it's really sweet. It's such a precious gift to me to be able to like really get to understand someone's unique complexity because everyone's different. Yeah, there's going to be themes. And part of my capacity to even name those things comes from hearing them a lot. And also me experiencing it, me going through something similar and having me empathizing with myself and naming all the feelings and needs inside of me allows me to be able to make better guesses over time.
And what would you say to someone who, because I feel like, again, in this culture that we've created where a lot of us feel unheard, somebody's going through that process, and what language could they use? What could they do if they then want to be empathized with themselves, right? That it's like, okay, are you now complete? Like, is it okay if we switch to something I really need to be heard and understood on? Like, how would you suggest somebody go about that?
So can you give me like an example?
Just, yeah, let's say that in the flow of a conversation, that it is all about one person, and one person is listening and supporting, and one person is explaining and expressing and getting heard. How would you suggest people then swap that and then express their desire to be heard and listened to? Because I think part of being able to offer space is knowing that you can then have the space held in return for you. Because for example, at the end of that exercise, is there any part of you that went, I kind of wish I was heard in that way? Like, that you want the same treatment that you just got? That you just gave? Yeah.
I mean, this is great. So this illuminates a few different aspects of really important elements of NVC to me. Yeah, I think you're correct. I think being able to name that in a relationship can be very vulnerable and very tricky to navigate. Because on one hand, I don't think you want to reassure the person that you appreciate holding space for them and you love hearing about their lives. And if you were to share that you would also love to maybe have a sense of balance, right? Because again, I'm trying to communicate through my feelings and needs. Like, I might say something like, yeah, like I'm noticing a lot of the times when we hang out, more often I'm in this position of listening and you're in a position of sharing parts of your life. And I love it. You know, I feel so touched and so moved, and I'm so appreciative that you're willing to be vulnerable with me. And I love learning about you. And like, that has to be really genuine when you share that.
Yeah. The
genuine appreciation. And, you know, there's this part of me that is really longing in life to be able to heard like that more myself. And I'm curious, is this possible in our relationship? And it might not be, but I just want to name that this is something that's really alive for me. And so what's happening inside me there is that I'm not attaching my need to someone specifically. And that's one of the most important lessons of NVC that's really, really hard to do.
Because there's no, you're doing this, you're causing this. It's just, this is what's happening for me.
Or I need this from you.
Yeah.
It's more like, hey, like, this is something that's really alive for me. I want to see if there's a possibility, or that's the request energy, is like exploration, openness. And you know what? If this person does say no, then it's going to inform me whether that's the type of relationship that I really, if I do want in the few main, say, friendships I have, if that balance is really important to me, then that might inform the way that I move forward. You know?
And then that like demand versus request piece, that if that request is then met from the other person, or if a negate to a request, if somebody doesn't accept the request and says no, if the other person then gets angry or starts putting judgments, and then that then becomes a demand, right? So.
This is a tricky one that I think I'm actually really trying to expand on, because maybe Marshall talks about this, but me and my good friend Miriam, who is a certified trainer, we try to create a new distinction of like, there's demands, there's requests, but when we also try to put in boundaries, it's like a third option. Maybe like, you could call them non-negotiables, or you could call them, but the energy, the fundamental difference is that demand is in the energy of judgment. That's the key. It's like, you want to like power over, make someone do something, and if they don't do it, you're going to punish them for it. And there's usually some form of judgment infused in that. A boundary is more like, hey, look, like, my health and my safety are really important to me. And like, if this were to ever become, if physical violence were ever to be inflicted on me, like, I'm going to walk away. Like, you're not necessarily judging the person, like that. You're really just trying to be like, look, this is just how things are going to be. You know, it's very much like, it's more of a neutral truth that's being named. And here's the line, and I'm going to take action to make sure I'm honoring my needs. Like, I can hear your needs, and I can hear that you're even in a really weird way trying to, you know, no matter what someone does, that's another component of NVC. No matter what someone's doing, it's an attempt to meet their needs, even if their strategy is really not very effective.
Even if they don't even know what their needs are.
Yes. And their strategy could have really, really intense impacts on other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate. But a lot of like the kids we see growing up, like the behaviors that we would call not good, you know, it's like they're trying to meet some kind of need, and like they really need to be seen for that and need to be held accountable to the behavior that's not working,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe learn to empathize with the impact of the impact it's having on other people, and then reconnect with their need and be like, okay, what's another way that I can meet them? What are more effective ways? That's a really important part of our development that we just don't get. So many of us do not get, even to this day. It's like, luckily I have other adults who are also all trying to figure it out, and we do it together, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think the really allowing children the space to just express instead of have to explain, I think is a key way to connect children to their emotions, right? Like they're usually asked to explain something that they don't even understand. And then they're, you know, told not to feel a certain way. And again, they don't even understand it yet. I think there is something to allowing like a moment for it to express itself. Like the temper tantrum needs to get out a little bit. You know, that energy needs to escape. It needs to have a chance to complete that stress cycle. But then you can talk about it, but only once the emotion's been felt.
You know, I appreciate you saying that. I've had some more rare instances where people don't want to go into naming feelings and needs. It's like for them, that's getting still there is naming feelings and needs. It is this cross between, it's a little bit more left brain because you're naming it with words instead of just being completely in the raw experience, which tends to be more the right brain, even though there's a bunch of complexity with left and right brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had one partner specifically who like would just be like not yet. Like, just let me be in my emotion fully. I need to fully be in this and just be with it. Mm-hmm. And then once it kind of goes through this phase, then we can go into naming the feelings and needs. And actually, I would actually really appreciate that. I love it. But can we just hold on a second, you know?
I find that one's really difficult though, because I completely celebrate that and I want that to happen, but everybody has their own process.
Exactly.
And some people take days or a week. And that can, like, let's say, for example, you live with someone and their process is a week long and, you know, you still have to be around them, but that hasn't resolved yet. And you haven't been able to work through that. I know that like, that might be a really specific example, but when one person, let's say that there's an incident and one person, you know, needs to take a walk around the block, cool down a bit. And in half an hour, they really want to talk about it. And that for them is their process. And so in half an hour, they are ready to talk and they need to get this out. Otherwise, it's going to distract them for days. The other person needs to go take a bubble bath and then journal about it and then can't talk about it for the next couple of days. Like they need time to process. Both of those things are so equally valid. And that is your process. And you don't want to interrupt that other person's needs. But at the same time, they don't match. And one person's going to feel very unmet for those couple of days where the other person hasn't fully processed it.
Yeah. This is where I think learning about attachment styles and relational neurobiology, interpersonal neurobiology becomes incredibly helpful. And this is now we're leaving the realm of nonviolent communication here, but they're related. But I do think it's really, really, it's helped me so much to recognize like, okay, I'm more on the avoidance side of the spectrum. I tend to want space and be by myself when I'm feeling intense emotions and holding myself accountable to that. I've had moments where I made really beautiful requests for space and my partner who tends to be more anxious, it's hard for them. But there's certain things I've learned to communicate that make that easier. Like just reassurance, like, hey, like our relationship is okay. I need to take some time for myself to be able to process this, but I just want you to know, like, I love you. I care about you. We'll talk again Thursday afternoon. Give them a specific time frame. Like I've learned those things through counseling, couples counseling, really helps. Now, the accountability is like, am I actually looking at my stuff in that time frame? I've had many instances where that Thursday comes around and I have not processed a single moment of that. And I'm literally in the exact same place. It just all comes back to the surface. And so acknowledging, yes, people have processes, but they actually need to be willing to get uncomfortable and go into the vulnerability. And there's many ways we can learn to do that. It could be to some degree through dance and like all, yoga and all these other ways, they're all great tools, but just being careful that we're not bypassing, we're not avoiding the actual emotional experience.
Yeah.
The part where expression needs to happen, full feeling of the feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I find that one's a really difficult one to navigate, because you can't really, like, you can see something in someone else that they might not be able to name themselves. And so, like, how do you help to get them to the point, or how do you then work on compromising so that you can meet each other in the middle and, schedule time 2 days from now that you can both speak about it, instead of, wanting to speak about it an hour after the incident, or wanting to speak about it 4 days after the incident, and really working together to meet in the middle.
I would say, and this connects to another pitfall that I commonly name, is that NVC is a lot less effective if you're not regularly working on your deeper wounds. So if you don't have a regular, whether that's counseling or ceremonies or something, you're going to the deeper implicit layers. If you're not doing that at all, they're going to be playing huge factors into the dynamic, and your ability to use NVC is going to be a lot more limited, because NVC is not meant to heal trauma, even though feelings and needs guesses can help with healing trauma. That's not the purpose of it. And that's a good distinction to make. I think every human being on the planet, I would ideally have the ability to do active empathy and be able to hear someone with presence and curiosity and make feelings and needs guesses. Mm-hmm. But they're not going into the role of a counselor or therapist where I'm purposely going to help you regress back to being a child and go back to those early memories. Because that's a great way to heal trauma, but it really takes a skillful, practiced, educated person to be able to do that. So just being careful that there's a distinction between those two things. Yeah.
Don't turn your partner into a counselor.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of accountability. Like the last major relationship I was in, I really encouraged my partner to expand their emotional support network. And they did. They were one of the greatest people I've ever met at taking action. I'd be like, I really think that, something like this could be helpful. And they'd be like, okay, boom. Next day they did it. It was just like, what the heck?
Oh, that's so sexy.
If only I had the ability to be that action oriented. But yeah, they had multiple empathy buddies. Basically every day there was a time that designated towards emotional support.
Wow.
And I was just absolutely blown away. And, it's been 3 years or so since then, and they have grown leaps and bounds. It's such a testament to the power of just holding yourself with care and curiosity, and someone else helping you hold it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we've been going at this for a while, and it's all been so good. Is there anything else that you really want to speak to that you feel like we haven't?
I feel like I just want to reiterate that you might have already experienced NVC on some level. You might have heard someone using the languaging and it just didn't work for you. You might have tried to do it yourself and it failed. And you might have built some kind of conception that NVC doesn't work, or that it's I've heard some people say some of the most violent people I've ever met use NVC, right? And I think that's true. Any tool, if utilized by your judgment consciousness, will still, doesn't matter all the words on the surface. If at the heart of it, you're still in a place of judgment, that's always what's going to be felt. And so NVC is truly about transforming that judgment consciousness in a healthy way, giving your space to express it fully, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a really strong advocate for finding places to express your rage and your anger and all your judgments where, that's okay. And it's a place to express your mourning and your tears, talk about your fears, just place where all the emotions are really welcome to be fully expressed. And just know that that NVC in its integrity in its purest form is a truly beautiful thing that can transform your life. One of the best practices I've ever kind of learned is this idea of the energy bubble. So imagining inside your own body, you're embodying the energy of curiosity, and then feeling the energy actually expand outside of your body and encapsulate the other person you're talking to. And just practicing that ability, be in the energy of it. That is one of the greatest things that can change your life or change your relationships is just having that capacity. And that takes a lot of self-awareness and sincere focus. Because all of a sudden they start talking about something that you relate to, or they start talking about something and maybe they have subtle judgments towards something that reminds you of you. Like, how do you maintain that capacity to stay curious and just really be that space for someone to talk, you know, and get curious on what are their feelings and needs? You know, Marshall used to always say that I don't listen to what people say anymore. If I did, I'd be getting into arguments all the time. I'm listening on the layers below it. Even if I completely disagree with an opinion, I can almost guarantee I connect with the value that's underneath it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, we all have the same needs as humans, right? So if you distill an opinion or a thought or an emotion down to its core, you're going to connect with someone. Almost guaranteed. Yeah.
And, you know, I'll also say, like, NVC is just one piece of a complex tool set that you need. It's not the answer to everything, but I do think it's an incredibly important tool that I just haven't really found in other places. And I'm a very avid learner of lots of different modalities and lots of different personal growth. And it just holds something unique for me that I think is literally, if we can't learn as a species to take emotional responsibility, understand what, like, projecting our past wounds onto the present is, and take the responsibility of, like, okay, this means I need to heal, and going asking for that help over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. If we don't do that, I think as a species, like, we'll collapse. Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's absolutely crucial. So
when are the times that NVC isn't the answer?
Like, I think sometimes with, like, setting boundaries, for example, I've learned a lot of assertiveness techniques that have really helped me. There's some mentioning of it in the body of work of NVC, but not as directly as a skill set that I found really helpful outside. There's a lot more evolution of looking at, like, power dynamics combined with NVC, but power dynamics in it itself is incredibly important. I personally love a lot of, like, belief work, like building healthy beliefs and, like, visualizing who I wanted to become. That's really helped me, that NVC is connected to. Like, I can every time I name my need and I feel the energy of my needs, I'm going to be more likely to build the life based on them. So there's definitely overlap, but it's not necessarily meant to be that. Whereas you can consciously focus on what you want to build more so. And so when I play music, beautiful movie soundtrack music, and I'm visualizing the life that I want, it's a more conscious, it feels like a slightly different technique. But
interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of things out there that I think that all connect together.
So could you name a couple of them? Like, maybe not, we don't have to get into them, but give people little, like, nuggets of where they might go to find these other bodies of work or tools.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, you know, I'm a little hesitant to share. You know what's funny is that I think one of the gifts that I have is that I can see the heart of something. It's almost like, imagine someone shows me a body of work, I can really think and feel into it, and I can get to the essence of, like, okay, this is what it's really trying to say. Even if a bunch of other things on the surface I might not agree with, I get what it's trying to get across. But I don't actually trust that other people can do that. And so I might share a certain person that's helped me. Like, a good example of this is a guy named Dr. Robert Anthony. He has a series called Beyond Positive Thinking. But a lot of people, based on what they believe right now, they'll listen to that and they'll have a misconception of what is trying to be said. And this is where it gets complex. I sometimes feel limited. Like, I'd have to actually sit down with the person, show it to them. We'd have to be able to have a conversation about it and work through it. I've heard a lot of people listen to some of that work, like positive thinking or manifestation work, and immediately just, like, they'll get a concept like, oh, well, that's victim blaming, and then just shut it down. and never go back to it.
Oh, wow.
They don't see the power and the brilliance in it. And that's another sign of judgment consciousness coming through. So it's such a tricky thing to navigate. And it's not to say that your judgment doesn't have actually a gift inside of it. It does. But if you don't actually go into it and look into what does that say, what your feelings and needs are, then your own judgments and woundings of your past might be controlling the decisions that you make and limiting your ability to access really brilliant things in life. But it's really, really hard to even realize you're doing it and notice when you're doing it. And I guarantee I'm still doing it. So it's like, I think I want to come up with a term. I don't know what to come up with yet, but like a term that distinguishes when you're speaking, thinking, acting from a place of wound, you don't realize it, or when you're doing it from a place of like neutrality or
love
or settlers love, or because I think that's such an important distinction.
It is.
Like, have I built this whole belief system because I was hurt as a young boy and I was abandoned by my mother? Now have I built this whole belief system of how the world is based on that wound?
Yeah, the way I like to look at that is, am I making this decision out of fear or out of love? Yeah. Right, out of fear of whatever that thing is that's been this core developmental piece, or that's cemented itself somewhere deep down inside of me and directed my movements unconsciously or consciously. I guess it goes from being unconscious to being conscious, and then you have to actively work to change it once it becomes conscious. Like, let's say my intelligence wound, for example, like that it, started out as unconscious, and then you bring it to the forefront, you realize it's there, but you can't just immediately remove it, because then you would actually destabilize yourself, right? Like, knowing it's there is a powerful way to know that, like, okay, I can change this. And then you will get to a place where, okay, I will change this, and I am changing this. But yeah, you can't just rip your beliefs out without replacing them with stronger and more fortified and more, beliefs that are more in alignment with who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, that gentle, like having a patience with yourself and a gentleness of like, it takes time, it takes steps. You can't just go from 0 to 80. You could, but it'd probably overwhelm you.
Oh yeah, no, you can't do anything too quickly. Like, you can't. I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned from like, once you see the place you want to go and like trying to sprint towards it, and then realizing, shit, like you can't just sprint towards this. You will collapse at some point. And like, I think a lot of people, once they start sprinting, like, for example, take NVC, like you see this framework and you go, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And I want to communicate that way. And why don't I communicate that way? Okay, I'm going to run as fast as I can towards it. I'm going to try to employ all the language right away, maybe without stopping and truly understanding it along the way. And then like, you'll get burnt out before you get there, and then you'll just stop and give up, or
you'll fail really badly. And yeah, I think another example of this is like somebody being vegetarian. So one of my favorite examples of it is that, if you go all in on this and you just like cut yourself off and tell yourself this is who you are and this is what you're going to do and these are your beliefs, and then you crave bacon and you eat bacon once, and then you go, oh, well, it's all out the toilet. Like, it's all out of the window. Let's just throw it all out. And then you end up being a vegetarian for like 3 months, instead of if you had just allowed yourself to gradually go into this, or even just like be kind to yourself, practice empathy for your own choices, and let yourself have a little bit of meat, let yourself eat sustainable meat, whatever it is, and just like, titrate that experience into your life. And then all of a sudden you've been a vegetarian for 5 years, and ultimately you've probably achieved your goal better of, whatever the belief system it was that made you want to be a vegetarian, whether, let's say it was helping the environment, that like you've helped the environment much more by being a mostly vegetarian for 5 years than a complete, really strict vegetarian for 3 months. I think dieting is a really good example of that. If you even look at the statistics of dieting, like how many people relapse and it doesn't work.
No.
And I think that's a direct correlation to trying to go 100% really quickly instead of doing the gradual, and like building more like a system that's going to help you actually navigate the failures, the ups and downs, the gradual progression, these kinds of things, are just so much more effective long term.
Yeah. A little bit at a time. Just start with one language change, one mindset change. And then I really liked your example of like journaling, like what are my needs? What are my feelings? Is there other examples of that you can bring in? Like, simple exercises that you can do yourself.
Well, the other one was like practice with pet peeves. Practice with pet peeves, naming feelings and needs. It's a great one. I would say also like having conversations, like take concepts from NVC and have conversations with people who really get it. Because this is the thing, if you have conversations with other people who don't really know the work, you're both just speaking from your own conditioning, and you might reinforce ideas in each other about how it just doesn't make sense. I don't know how many times I've heard people come to me with some form of misconception of what NVC is. It's really, really common. And it's understandable because it's almost like a different way of thinking. And it's going to take some time to like, no matter what, if you want to accept it or not, or like it or not, the amount of judgment consciousness that you've been raised in is incredibly strong. Like all around us, all the time, people are judging each other, gossiping, evaluating each other, punishing each other. Morality, good, bad, right, wrong. It's so, so strong. And it's not even to put your judgment on that. It's not to say that that's good or bad. It's more about just like, is any of that consciousness, any of that way of thinking helping me in my life? Is any of it truly meeting my needs? That's what you have to, it's like your own journey. You have to come to terms with that. And for me, it's so clear. It's so obvious. I can even remember the really key moments in my life where I was like, wow, I could hear the judgment blaring in my head. And I would have just been reactive to this person. And I would have just came back at them. But it's like, that's why I love that quote from Marshall. Like, a judgment is just a tragic expression of your needs because it's never really going to meet them.
No.
And that's why I think that's so true.
And that, I guess that goes full circle back to like any judgment that you're placing on someone else is really a reflection of your own needs.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome. If people want to find you and connect with your body of work and all of the things that you do, how can they do so?
What I want to say to close is, I do intro trainings, normally in Nanaimo, which I know is a very specific place, but intros can also be arranged. Like if you get a group of people together, if an organization, you want to bring into an organization, but really spending like 2 full days in an intro is very important. And the great thing is myself, if Miriam joins me, we like to make it really engaging. We incorporate connecting with the body, doing creative things, making it fun. Like, I think it's really important to transform learning in that way. So intros are a possibility. One-on-one training is a possibility as well. I don't do it as often, but I do it here and there. I have a little bit of space for that. And you can email me with my name at gmail.com. No spaces, no period. Or add me on Facebook. Yeah. I absolutely love this work and I think it's really important and I love sharing with people.
Yeah, it shows. Thank you so much for your passion and your knowledge on the subject. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, we come to the end of this episode of Reclaim Your Radiance. Thank you so much for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode and came away with some valuable insights, the absolute best way you can show your support and appreciation is by sharing it with your friends or on social media. Your support is absolutely invaluable. To connect, find us on Instagram at @HellofAHall or on TikTok at Reclaim Your Radiance. Or you can sign up for our mailing list to receive bonus content and stay in touch with what's happening in the world of Reclaim Your Radiance, including local workshops, retreats, self-love courses, personal one-on-one coaching, and so much more. Head on over to the episode notes in the show description to find those links, and we hope to hear from you soon. All right, everyone, until next time, stay radiant. This is ASMR Kris. You are beautiful. You have inside you to accomplish anything that you wish to accomplish. You are powerful. You are abundant. You are magnetic to everything that you desire when you are living in alignment with your truth. You are radiant. You shine. You are loved. You are so